Welcome, everyone, and thank you for your time. Now, Chris, I'm going to start with you, not just because you're closest to me, but because you were part of a very interesting experiment 20 years ago, where you had to spend 3 months at home ordering everything online. I can't even remember what we were able to do 20 years ago. So in a nutshell,
yes.
Can you compare for us what you were able to do then
yes.
and what you can do now?
Sure. Well, I think that the first thing, Vivek, is that in the year 2000, if you wanted to be on the internet, you had to be in a fixed place. You had to be at a PC. And I think that's the biggest change from then to now, is that nowadays, with the advent of smartphones, most of us have a computer with us all the time.
All the time.
Invariably connected to the internet. And so that's a radical change from what life was to trying to be online then.
Now, I read that you couldn't even order a burger at the time. So what were you able to do?
Yeah, fast food wasn't on offer.
No
much
Uber
to
Eats.
my regret. No.
No Mr. Delivery.
No,
Okay.
no 60/60, nothing like that.
Yeah.
So in those days, there were very few of the established brands that we know online. That's something that's happened over the past 20 years. But there were a small raft of startups that were trying out e-commerce, but none of them were experimenting with fast food. So
could you even look at a menu online? Could you look at a menu?
No, you could look at menus,
That's
but you couldn't
my
order.
favorite thing, is to look at a menu of a restaurant, even if I'm not going.
There was a pizza place that had a list of menus. You could see things, you could try order, but just it never arrived.
It never arrived.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, fast forward, Dean, 20 years, and I mean, we've come so far. I mean, apps and everything that you can do. I mean, the most I can do, I'll tell you, is I do my banking. I'll get an Uber, and maybe the entertainer app is what I use a lot. But, you know, the rest of them, I don't even know why they're here. So you're a futurist. So 20 years ago, did you see this coming? Did you see us being in a space like this?
Yeah, well, 20 years ago I was 14, so I wasn't thinking
Showing
about
off
that.
now, okay.
So, but
Could we have seen that this is where?
No, I think it's accelerated really, really rapidly, and I think in the last 5 years, just as it's accelerated at such a rapid rate. The conversations that the businesses that I've been advising over the past few years are having is just completely different now compared to 5 years ago. And I think that especially in a business context, not necessarily just for the fancy executives, but for everyone in the workforce, that the next few years is just going to change like there's never been changed before, particularly because of everything with artificial intelligence and everything that brings with it.
What are you telling people? How are you telling them to prepare?
So learn, and learn some more and be curious. Because the thing is that the biggest problem with most people in terms of preparing for the future is the fact that everyone's so busy. So the average adult, you know, you got emails, you got meetings, you got home responsibilities, you still have to try to keep healthy, maybe you got your religious commitments that you got. There's so much you have to do, and then you still have to prepare for the future. It ends up being the bottom of everyone's priorities. I always say that as long as you continually become a lifelong learner, you're going to be relevant and engaged with this new world and understand it. And actually, people battle, and that's why I go in. I've actually created a board game, believe it or not, to try to help people in 3 hours understand the whole world, for example, of artificial intelligence, because I know that...
So you're using old school to teach what's coming. I mean, a board game is quite old school, am I right?
100%, and that's why it's awesome.
So you can never really let go of old school stuff, I suppose. We're always going to need it somewhere, right?
100%.
Okay. Cassandra, from a psychological point of view, I would imagine that, especially for the older members of society, this is something that's very difficult to grapple with, is to get in touch. But how else? And when I say older, I put myself in that category, okay? But we have to move with the times. But what's the pressure of that, of having to stay connected to your kids or your grandkids or, you know, whatever it is, and especially for people who don't quite know how to do this?
Well, I think the major thing people feel is anxiety. They are scared of technology.
And
especially
FOMO also.
Completely. If you've grown up in a time where technology wasn't readily available, it isn't part of your language. You don't know how to use the language, you don't know how to use it, and it can be quite overwhelming and scary. I think it can also be very difficult, especially as a parent, as a teacher, when technology is around you, whether you like it or not. If you aren't on it, if you don't know how to use it, it can be a difficult experience. So I think people really struggle with taking that first first step and being curious. I think that's the thing, being curious about it rather than afraid of it.
Well, it's not all bad. I mean, there are so many positives. Oh, I forgot to mention, my yoga app is one that I use a lot as well. So there's a positive, is I get to stay healthy, and if I don't really feel like driving to a gym, then I've got that and I can do that. So in a way, it's made life a lot more convenient. So in addition to adding stress, it can relieve some of the pressure for some of us, can't it?
Completely. I think you have so much more accessible. You have access to information. You have ways to connect with people. You have things that you can do, like a yoga app, ordering food. I mean, you can order the level of priority. There are health apps now where you can go and have consultations much easier. So there's a lot of convenience that comes with it and a lot of connectivity.
Well, Chris, I suppose a lot of people might be left feeling a little vulnerable by this, having to put your entire life is online. I mean, I was chatting to a colleague of mine, Michael Murilli, and we'll chat to him in just a little bit as well about, if we had a country like the US saying, the Russians managed to manipulate our election and they managed to do this via technology. I mean, who are the rest of us? How are we protecting ourselves? And I mean, I sometimes feel particularly vulnerable. Even when I'm using my banking app, you tend to look over your shoulder like, who's standing behind me? So it does come with its fair share of paranoia as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think as in with most human developments, there are good sides and there are bad sides. And some of the optimism that we felt 20 years ago has come to fruition. There have been some wonderful developments. We've spoken about some of them here. Online learning, to take Dean's point still further, there have been some wonderful success stories, South African companies who've taken online learning to the world. But I think for all those improvements, one also needs to temper that with some caution, some circumspection, concerns about security, concerns about privacy, concerns about harassment that people experience online. Social media as a point of entry to this conversation. For every KFC wedding that it produces, for every crowdfunding initiative that happens after the Australian fires, we've got the Bell Pottinger situation we had here, where people manipulate conversations. For every Tito Mboweni teaching you about his recipes for making meals at home, you've got Donald Trump. And so these two things trade each other off, as do many parts of human life.
So you've got to take the good and, I suppose, discard the bad if you can. Indeed, I mean, how do we embrace and still protect ourselves from what's coming in the future? How do we just open our minds to that? And I suppose we have to, because it's the way it's going. But still keep a pen and paper at home somewhere.
100%. You can't get away from the fact that the future is going to be a lot more technological driven. But at the same time, I think it's very, very important to take times in your lives where you digital detox and
like every weekend.
Free. Yeah, so I'm a religious Jew, and I don't know if you could tell, but the thing is that
yes, that was a giveaway.
Yeah, well, anyway, so 1 day a week, like use any technology as part of what we do is the best thing ever.
I can imagine.
But on the other hand, if you want to grow your business, or if you want to get healthy and stuff like that, there's nothing better than plugging into the right technology to be able to help you get where you are. And if you want to achieve many goals in your life, chances are technology will be there as your aid and not as a hindrance. But you have to balance that, because otherwise it's easy to become addicted. You've
got to have the mettle for it, I suppose. And Cassandra, I mean, are we forgetting how to be people with other people? Because we're so busy with our apps. Things are happening instantly. We get instant gratification with certain things. We're looking at online dating even. We don't even bother to go out and meet people. We're depending on an app. What's that doing to us?
Well, I think we're also getting very disconnected in certain ways. So I think one of the biggest dangers is losing yourself to someone online. Online, you get to be anyone you want, and that means you can change who you are. It means you can say things you wouldn't normally say. And it also means you engage less in the real world and you spend more time online. So I think one of the biggest dangers is to make sure that the life that you live is actually real.
So make sure that you keep it real at some point. Talk to some human beings for a change.
Completely.
Nice. Okay, well, unfortunately, this is where we stop talking. That's where we leave it for now. But a quick overview of how far we've come, especially in the last 20 years, as we heard here, and what you should be embracing, what's coming in the future.